As usual, I use the term loosely. Hey, we're going to pop this transmission apart. There's a bearing in here I'm going to change. We're going to check the shifter fork clearance and spacing, and hopefully we'll get this together and pop it in the engine. And anyway, let's get started. I'll try to let you hear. Don't need that part. We'll get that in a minute. I'll try to let you hear why we're changing this bearing. Hear that click in there? Something's wrong in there. And these are sealed on both sides, so you can't really clean it out. You can pry the seal out of there, but you can't put it back in. You destroy it getting it out. Anyway, it's got a bad ball or something in there, so let's get that bearing out of there. Okay, let's take the paw carrier off. Okay, let's take a look at this trapdoor. See these striations? This is evidence that the bearing has rotated. Let's see. Well, let's get the bearing off of the clutch gear. Some of them are real tight press fits, some of them aren't. This one's not. It came off easy. Let's look at the bearing too. See the striations on the bearing. More evidence that the bearing has rotated in the trapdoor. Okay, here's the new one. Nice and smooth. Yeah, it's a little goes in there. Let's measure. Let's do a little measuring. Okay, the guesstimator would have this one at 2.833. Let's guesstimate this hole here. Okay, and the hole is 2.833, so virtually the same size. That's a good thing. I wish this was a little smaller to be a little tighter, but I got an idea. I think I'm gonna do something to this that I do to a lot of them that are a little on the loose side. Okay, this is what I do a lot of times when I run into loose bearings. Is I will raise little welts on the steel insert. I'll raise a lot of little welts, and I try to make the pattern kind of semi-consistent, maybe you know, every 3/8 or a 1/4 inch apart. It's kind of a pain in the ass to do. See if you can see this. Kind of a random, more or less evenly spaced little punch marks around there. Each one raises a little bit of a dimple. So that and some green Loctite sleeve mount should hold the new bearing snugly in place. At least that's the theory I'm going by, and it seems to work. It's worked in the past for me, so we'll knock the bearing in there and truck on. There we go. It's going in a little crooked there. Okay, one other finer point of installation. The snap ring does not sit tightly against this outer bearing race. So when I install these, I always install them from the inside out and seat the bearing against the outer snap ring. If you were to seat the bearing against the inner snap ring, and in the course of service and use it started to drift around and slid out, it would increase the end play on the main shaft, because the main shaft of course butts up against the clutch gear, and you know, be another 3 or 4 thousandths of play in there probably that could be induced if this bearing moved. And obviously the other thing you got to be aware of is with this green Loctite on there, you want to really make sure you don't get any inside the bearing, or it will fuck things up in there, I'm sure, if it hardens, and it might. Anyway, that's the bearing. Bearing is in. Bearing is in. Snap ring is in. Let's put the clutch gear in and start checking our clearances. One of the habits I think a guy should get into is at least doing a ballpark check. You know, you buy a new bearing, you assume the race is the right size, you assume that, you know, this is the right size, and you can just hammer the two things together. You know, every once in a while you run into a problem and you'll screw up the parts. So I like to check just to make sure we're in the right ballpark. This is 1.376 and this is 1.377. You know, and I realize that caliper's not necessarily the most accurate measuring device in these situations, but you know, it's a good ballpark guesstimate, and if there was anything grossly out of the ordinary, it would tell you. So anyway, these two things should fit together pretty easily. Okay, here's a piece of square steel tubing, fits over the stub shaft, sits on the inner race. Now I could whack the gear, and I won't be you know, impacting the balls. I'm just pounding on the race, so I'm not going to hurt the bearing at all. I'm not going to be exerting any force on the balls. And that's it. It's home. Spins nicely. Good to go. Okay, let's test fit this thing and see how it goes. Let's pop it in a drill press vise over here just to kind of hang on to it. Makes it a little easier. Counter shaft has to go in first because when you're sliding it in, this gear won't clear the other gears on the main shaft stack. Then we can put the main shaft in. Getting the splines to line up with the gear could be a little tricky. Okay, there we go. Wasn't too bad this time. Sometimes it's a bitch. Okay, it's in all the way. Let's pop a couple of the shifter forks in there. Okay, this is the one that's worn out, just to see how it was in the first place. We're going to stick it in there. And let's put the pawl carrier on. Let's tighten up the pawl carrier bolt just a little bit to hold it all together. Okay, it's just snug. Let's put the shifter fork shaft in. Okay, it's in. Okay, let's tighten up a little bit the detent pin just to hold it in a detent. Okay, gears are all in, shafts are all bottomed out. Okay, we're ready to look at a couple of things. This is the third and fourth shifter dog. This is move it this way, you're in fourth, move it this way, you're in third. And what you want to check is the clearance between the dog and the adjacent gears. So we got quite a bit of clearance there, and over on the other side we got quite a bit of clearance there. It's even, both sides look about the same. I'm not putting a feeler gauge in there yet. I don't know if I'm going to, because it looks pretty good. Let's flip it around and look at the first and second shifter. Okay, we're in neutral. Okay, so let's see what we got here. What we got here is, this is interesting. What you got here is the, I'm in neutral, so I should have clearance here. I should have about yay much clearance. I don't have any clearance there. It's actually contacting. Now there's enough slop in this thing so that when you're going down the road, it probably isn't going to bounce into gear. But that's a problem. You don't want those two things hitting. It'll chew the ends off of these shifter clutches. Okay, on the other side, well, you got a similar kind of scenario there. That is hitting over there. Now, this is that worn out shifter fork. Part of this might be attributable to the wear on this shifter fork, giving this gear just a little more extra slide back and forth room. If you just kind of let it, you know, I'm pushing it. I always push them a little bit to, you know, get like the worst case scenario going. And, you know, if you just kind of let it float by itself, it's not too bad. It's only when you push on it. So this shifter fork looks like it needs to move this way. So it's probably going to need a shorter shifter fork. I dug through my piles of shifter forks and this never happens. I actually have a -5 and a -10. and we could try them both out. Let's see, yeah, here you go. I don't know if you can see this on camera or not. These are all marked, well, supposed to be marked. They're not always, well, they're always marked somewhere. They're not always marked in the same place. Let's see if you can see. But anyway, yeah, -10 and -5. There you go. Okay, I got the -5 shifter fork installed. So we're a little closer to first gear, a little farther away from second gear, which is what we wanted. Let's pop it into first, and I'm going to line up the dogs first because it'll go in easier if the dogs aren't lined up. So let's line up first. Whoops, that was second. Let's go back the other way. Okay, we're back in neutral. Let's go to first. First is good. Neutral. Line the dogs up. Second. Beautiful. Let's go to third. Line the dogs up. Beautiful. Pops right in. Let's line the dogs up. We'll go to fourth. Oh, beautiful. Doesn't get much better than that. Let's go back to neutral. Third. Second. Which way is second? Second is this way. And it's coming. Second. And we'll go to neutral. Okay, the next step is to put this transmission into that crankcase and see if it fits. I've got this extra washer in here, which due to the shape and size of the shoulder, it needs to be in there because these gears are a little different, other than one has a spiral on it and one doesn't. Actually, you might be able to see. Actually, you could probably see. Let me get these up to the camera. You can probably see what's going on. Okay. Look at this shoulder here, how tall it is on this gear, and look at how narrow it is on this gear. So the extra washer is making up for the thickness in this shoulder. Okay, I popped the trans into the crankcase with just a couple of arbitrary random thrust washers. Let's see what the main shaft end play is. About 20 thou. The book limit is 3 to 9. So let's see, whatever spacer's in there, we're going to find one that's about 11, 12 thousandths thicker. And that should do it for that one. Let me move my rig down to the counter shaft and we'll see what happens there. Okay, now for the counter shaft. Zero out the indicator. I'm pushing on the counter shaft drive gear through the little hole in the trap door. Got about a +8 and back to 0. So that is within limits. Well, that is within limits. Maybe +9, +8. That one is within limits. I don't know if I could find a washer, maybe a couple of thou thinner. But anyway, that one's going to be good to go with very slight adjustment. Yeah, maybe, well, actually a washer maybe a couple of thousandths thicker. Depending on how I fidget this, I could get it up to 12. Yeah, 12. I need to go about 3 or 4 thousandths thicker. So what did I say on the main shaft? About 10, and on the counter shaft I need to go about 3 or 4 thicker. So let's get a couple of washers out of the washer pile and see what happens. Okay, I found a thrust washer for the counter shaft that was about 5 thou thicker than the one that was in there. and we are well within the 3 to 9 tolerance for end play on that, so that's good to go. Oh, and by the way, I left the needle bearing out. I like to check the end play without the needle bearing in there. That way I could access the end of the shaft. It's a lot easier. Let's move the rig up to the main shaft and see what we got on that. Okay, so here's the dial indicator moved up to the main shaft. You got about a 7 there, 7 to 0. That's good to go. That one's within tolerance. Spacers are good to go. Just in case anybody's wondering, let me show you. I say I have a few thrust washers laying around to test fit these things. This is a few. This is a few. This is a few. These are the main shaft thrust washers. Do you need to have that many? I don't know, probably not, but inevitably I find out I don't have one the right size. So I keep a bunch of them around. If you had to buy these bastards, they're $5-6 bucks a piece. And then for the counter shaft, I keep a few of those laying around too. So there you go. You know, these are a little cheaper. They're a little smaller, but they're still $4 or $5 a piece probably. So you know, you got $100 worth of thrust washers laying in this pile. Probably $120 worth of thrust washers laying in the other pile. It's not easy or cheap to keep inventory on hand. You know, I could order these things one at a time, but you know how you'd have to put it together, measure it, order the thing, you know, pay shipping and all that on there. For me, doing it commercially, it's just worth having them on hand. Okay, free play's been checked. All the bits and pieces are ready to go. This trans is ready to get put back together again. This owner provided a new gear shift lever, and it's got splines on it. The ones without the splines, the lever tends to slip on the shaft. One of the things I do when I put these motors together is I drill the pawl carrier bolt and the detent plunger housing for safety wire. The needle bearing, the closed needle bearing, has been ultrasound cleaned. Like I said, I usually just throw these away and replace them, or at least I had in the past. But these damn things have gotten expensive over the years, so if they look okay and there's no crud in them, I'll run them through the ultrasonic and I use them again. So we'll knock this in. Don't forget to put this shaft in, or you'll be taking the trans out again. Okay, this trans is ready to be popped in. Gears have been lubed. The shifter cam has been lubed. Shafts have been lubed. Bearings are in. The gear shift shaft is in. I got my hardware somewhere laying around here. It's ready to go, so let's stick it in the hole. Okay, it's in there. Feels like the gear shift shaft is engaged with the slot on the pawl carrier. We'll run some nuts and bolts down and we'll call that in. Okay, let's pop the tranny bolts in, trapdoor bolts in, tighten them up. Okay, bolts are all in, bolts are all tight. Make sure it still rotates. It does. Still got my little bit of end play in there. Let's check the shifting. You know what, let's do first, let's put the rollers in the main shaft over here, because they won't, sometimes they won't shift right, because you do have a little bit of play in this shaft, and without the rollers in there to keep it lined up, they won't shift right sometimes. So let's put the rollers in there. I will drop one, I know it. There's 23 of them. Okay, 23 of them. I did not fit new ones. The bearing rates look good, the rollers look good. So these are going to be reused. I don't anticipate any problem whatsoever. Put a little dab of grease on them as they go in. Last one. Nice. Very nice. Okay, they're all in there. I didn't lose any, that's a good thing. Okay, let's see if it shifts gears. Okay, neutral. Second, third, fourth, third, second, neutral, first, back to neutral. And that's it for this video. It's as long as it needs to be. The trans is in, it's bolted in, it's staying in, it ain't going nowhere. So I am out of here. Hey, please hit the subscribe button. We'll see you next time. Bye.